Hello, ladies and gents. This is Jayme Blasiman, the host of the Femcanic Garage podcast. Welcome to the 5-part series of the dirty little secrets in the automotive and skilled trades industries. This blog series is brought to you by Chasidy Rae Sisk Writing and Communication and Femcanic Garage. We have interviewed industry experts on topics related to diversity, equity, and inclusion. We're excited to share their knowledge and experience with all of you. Now let's get started. McCeil Johnson is the Vice President of Accreditation and Regulatory Compliance at the University of Phoenix. She earned her BA, MA, and JD from the University of Iowa, College of Liberal Arts, and College of Law. Prior to joining the University of Phoenix, McCeil served as the Chief Legal Officer and Executive Director for Legal Affairs for the National Louis University. With over 20 years of professional experience gained in the areas of compliance, diversity, and legal affairs, makes McCeil the perfect expert to kick off our Week 1 topic, resources. Hello, everyone, and we have McCeil in the hot seat for Week 1. Welcome to our little series here. How are you doing, McCeil?
Good, how about you guys?
I am doing wonderful. I am super excited to pick your brain today from a selfish place of me wanting to learn, but that's really the genesis of why I started Femcanic Garage, because I wanted to learn from all the amazing women. But you have a particular skill set and experience that we were super excited about extending you an invitation, and more importantly, you accepting our invitation to be a part of this segment to really shed some light on some important topics in our industry. So thank you for being here.
Oh, thank you. It's just such an honor to even be asked to participate in this.
Absolutely. The honor is truly ours. So this whole topic that we're talking about this week and featuring is resources. Now that sounds really vague, but we're going to drill down a little bit in, we all know any person that is in the automotive, motorsports, or skilled trades industries. You don't have to be an expert in that industry to be able to look at the industry at a holistic view and see that there is truly a discrepancy around how many men versus women are in this industry. And what goes along with that is this kind of journey a lot of employers are going through of figuring out, how do we make our companies, our services, our benefits, our pay inviting in such a way that we are not pushing women away, but actually making it more inviting for women to be a part of this industry. And I think maybe that's the first conversation, because let's face it, none of us go to work for charity, right? We show up to work because we want a paycheck. We want to be able to take care of our family. We want to be able to do fun things. Why don't we talk a little bit about that first, and around like the gender pay gap, and what do you see and what experiences have you noticed, and what recommendations would you make?
Sure. I think, it's well known, or at least it should be well known, that there's a pretty massive gap between what women make in the workforce versus what men make in the workforce. And then when you start adding other additional elements to it, such as race, then those sort of divide the stakes even further. And so what I've noticed is that sometimes people don't even think about it, right? So that's part of the problem, is that they're not thinking about it. And so I think you have to make a conscious decision to think about it and then instill the appropriate review. And so if it's something that you haven't thought about at your particular company or agency, then now's a great opportunity to do it. Put together a committee or a council and review payroll, review the salaries of all the people that are currently employed, and just take a fair look at it and then compare it to the industry standards. and then make sure that the men that are working in your office are making the same thing as the women that are working in your office.
It sounds so simple, doesn't it? Like it makes you wonder why it is why we make it so complex, but it truly is that simple. And I think maybe the most challenging thing is the willingness to do that.
Yeah.
Do you think some employers are afraid of what they'll find out?
I think some employers are afraid of what they'll find out. I think that there's an innate human nature not to change, right? People like things as they are, they like to be comfortable. You and I both know there's this phrase where people say, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, right? So people get kind of caught up in that when sometimes change is actually a good thing and not a bad thing. But if you haven't been
Isn't
exposed,
that a matter of opinion too?
well,
If
it
it's not
is.
broken? Because to me, this seems broken,
It is. It
right?
is. It is. And I think if you're not familiar with change management, then you don't even know how to process a system for change. You don't even know how to think about change. And so that's what I mean when I say change becomes scary, because then they think that it's going to upset the apple cart, not understanding that it's really going to level the playing field.
Yeah, and create more opportunities. Because that's basically alienating 50%, about 50% of the population in the world,
It is. It is
right? And
definitely.
we're already having shortages in this industry. Why are we making it? Why are we creating or facilitating more barriers? Now, I'm kind of curious about this just to get your take with your experience. Why is it so, in your opinion, and I know this is your opinion, but this is based on your experience, why does it seem so taboo to talk about pay? Like it is like a big no-no. I spent years in corporate America, and it is so taboo for employees to talk about what their salary is or their hourly rate. Crazy taboo. But you get in sales, right?
Right.
Everyone can figure out what each other's making. So
Yeah.
there's nothing taboo about. Matter of fact, it's celebrated when you sell more, you make more because it's just basic percentages
Right.
typically.
Right. You know, it's an interesting dynamic, I think, that's developed over time, right? It's just almost like an unwritten rule. And back in the day, it actually was in most employee handbooks not to discuss your pay with other employees. So that, I think, is how it got originally reinforced to do the pay differential, right? Because you could be doing the same job as another person, not realizing that they're making, $20 more an hour or $5 more an hour than you are, because you're not supposed to talk about it.
Okay. I'm gonna go there, right? And this is the stuff that no one wants to talk about, right? And that is the whole purpose of why we're having this conversation. I asked that question because we talk about systemic racism,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I feel like these are the types of things that were put in place to maintain control of those things. And for women,
Yeah.
people of color, and McCeil, you are a woman of color. And by the way, when I met you and I saw that you were a woman of color, I'm like, yes, you go, girl. I'm like, yes.
Yeah.
It
Thank
was
you.
just that much sweeter. I have some close friends that are women of color,
Mm-hmm.
and they have shared how they will change their name. When I say change their name, let me rephrase that. They will use their first initial dot, their last name, for their
Mm-hmm.
resume. And they actually tested it to see how many callbacks they got, right? And when they removed they just used a first initial where it removed gender, it removed any preconceived notions about names. They got more callbacks for interviews. So it wasn't their opinion, they actually tested it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I wanted to get your take on that.
Yeah. I mean, I think,
Can we change that?
yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be one of those things that has to be continuously part of our nomenclature, right? Because when things are
Hmm.
hidden in linguistic format, it's not just a snap quick, we're going to change it overnight, right? Because this is part of our lexicon. It's part of the way we think, it's part of the way we talk. And so when it gets to that level, that's more systemic. And so you have to think about it in other ways, right? So then that's where you have to become intentional. And that's what I mean about thinking about, okay, so if we want to hire more people of color, then how do you do that? What do you do? What does that mean, right? Do you set up a committee? Do you, what is the first thing you would do to have your company reflect the society that we live in? You have to come up with a plan, right? Otherwise, it just
Yeah.
becomes something nice to have on paper and something good to say. So you have to be really focused about it. You have to have a plan with deliverables and really think through it. And sometimes I think it helps to have an outside consultant to really help you really fine tune what you need to do to make it happen.
Because sometimes we can't see the forest through the trees,
Right.
right? We can't see what our real problem is. But I've always wondered that because I spent 7 years in direct sales where we were all paid 100% commission. Everyone knew what each other made. There was no hiding it,
Right.
right? I get to corporate America. I'm in the financial industry, and holy mackerel, it is the most taboo thing to talk about your salary or your hourly pay. And I couldn't, it took me years to even, and to be honest, I still don't get it because I feel like the only people that benefits are are the companies trying to create those differentials. Because if you had nothing to hide, put it out there.
Yeah, I think it
Do
varies.
pay do pay
I
grades.
think it varies. I mean, I think in like let's say for public universities, for example, they have to list publicly for the state what everybody makes. So it is public and everybody does know. So I think that there are, at least in higher ed or other venues, other industries, there are industries that require you to map out what the requirements
Nonprofits.
are, nonprofits, right? So it's not holistic in that regard. So maybe there's a thought to think about what that might look like. But it is scary for certain employers, right? When you think of a smaller agency that only has a few employees, right? And then
A
they,
small mom and pop shop, for
right,
example.
right,
Yeah,
right,
yeah. It's an interesting conversation.
right.
Um, but I think what I'm hearing you say is step one, it starts with a self-assessment,
Yeah, definitely.
right?
I think,
A self-assessment.
yeah, whether you, and I think it's to each business's politics, right? What they want to do and how they feel like it benefits their employees. And I think if we stay focused on pay equity, that's the first part for me, right? For me, pay equity is more important than sharing what everybody makes. I think that that
Yeah,
might be a personal preference, whether it's a private company or non for profit. And I don't necessarily have an opinion about that one way or another, but what I do have an opinion about is fair pay. And I think that that's where we need an analysis to go through and review and say, is everybody fairly paid? And if they're not, then what's the plan to make sure that they are? And so that involves talent management. And so that's a critical piece that's missing from a lot of organizations. I know that a lot of organizations don't really have the bandwidth to have talent management, but even if they don't have talent management, they can do a review, they can do an audit.
yeah. It's interesting. We heard Dana. We interviewed her for this series as well. She's from Tech Force, and she shared a story of a young woman that had the kind of got pigeonholed into just doing oil changes.
Mm,
Well, sh based on her education and experience, there's no reason she should have been doing only that, right?
mm-hmm,
But she proposed, "Hey, put me pair me up against your what you deem as your best male tech,
mm-hmm,
and let's go head to head with a written test and an actual hands-on card test.
Mm-hmm.
And based on those results, factual results, let's then make a decision on if I deserve a promotion,
Right.
right? And she aced the test. He did not. They both completed the job how it should have been completed. But in that scenario, she's, if you want to kind of try to quantify it, she actually was ahead because she aced the test. She got the promotion, but it goes back to like what you're saying, where how can we, that was a review,
Right.
in essence, kind of like a review.
Right.
But she had to kind of push the envelope and ask for it. Now, do you see women, whether we want, whether we think we should have to do that or not, do you see women almost needing to do some of that in order to be equal?
Yeah, so I definitely believe in self-advocacy, and I do a series on negotiations. So the series I do on negotiations actually talks about not only your pay, but your title, right? Like, what's the matter with thinking about titles and proposing titles? And the thing is what people don't understand is sometimes employers are really open to that. I've had
Tell me
several.
more about proposing titles. Just, I don't want people to draw their own conclusion. What do you
Yeah.
mean by proposing titles?
Yeah, so like I think, okay, say your title is senior manager, right? But you think that that's a too general of a title. Then whatever you think the title should be, do your research and make recommendations. Maybe your title should be compliance manager or director or chief compliance officer, whatever the case may be. I think those are the things you have to present. So, for example, I'll take myself. I did do that. But when I did the proposal, I proposed three different titles. And I had detailed descriptions of why I thought I fit each one of the three different titles. So, those are things you can do in a creative way. I think sometimes people think when they're negotiating, they have to be aggressive. You don't have to be aggressive. You can make your point. It's not what you say, it's how you say it, right? You can go
And
in and have
facts.
right.
Would you agree, be factual and not emotionally based, but
Yes. Yes.
present
Yeah,
facts?
and that's what I did. I went and I presented facts and I presented three different scenarios and I had done my research at other places that were similar to our business. And I said, this is a more, I believe, more appropriate title for me based on what it is I'm doing and what it is I feel like I'm going to do in the future. And it didn't happen immediately, right? And so that's the other thing you have to prepare yourself for is we're not at McDonald's, right? It's not a sprint. This is a marathon, right? So you have to give an employer a chance to digest what it is you're saying, take it in, and then come back with the recommendation. But they did change my title. And so the way I like to think about it with salary changes or um, promotions is you have to think about it almost like planting seeds, right? When you plant a seed, the flower's not just going to immediately pop up. You have to water the seed, you have to cultivate it, and then do things for it to grow. And that's the same thing with the conversation at work with your employer is you have to start those conversations and say, I've looked at 15 other dealerships, and this is kind of the average rate. I'm not sure what other folks are making here, but I'd like to have my salary reconsidered. Those are ways that you can approach the conversation in a non-threatening way.
And that's a big eh, challenge that I feel as women we face. And I've put a lot of thought around this and research that I think women have less of a glass ceiling issue and more of a sticky floor issue. And I learned this from a consultant that worked with Safelite Auto Glass around diversity, equity, inclusion. And I interviewed her, and she blew my mind with that concept. Blew my mind. And I'm like, what do you mean by that? And she explained how part of our challenge is we don't ask for what we think we deserve.
Right. Right.
And there's many reasons for that, right? Part of it, and I think a big part of it is, one, we question whether we have the knowledge, experience, or education. Our certainty level has to be so high, right, compared to men. And there's research and statistics around all this. We're not going to get into all of that, but men don't have to have nearly the certainty level of being able to perform a job that women do. That's part of it. And the other part, I think, particularly in our industry, is we're afraid of being blackballed.
Right. Well, and I also think it's a bit of imposter syndrome. And so imposter syndrome is like if, let's say, me, right before the pandemic, I got promoted as a vice president, then somebody might say, oh, wow, did I really deserve that position? Am I really qualified for that? The answer is yes. Yes, I am really qualified. And in fact, um, at the time they were going to promote me originally, instead of making me a senior director, I had the same level to be promoted as a vice president. So those are things where you look at those things and you say, okay, well then why did they go down one road instead of another? Things like that.
Mm-hmm. And I think, the biggest takeaway that I'm getting from you right now is there's two things. Employers, there's an employer side and then an employee side to this, right? The employer side is do a self-assessment. Just do it and see what the data tells you. Don't make assumptions, but just let the data tell the story and see what maybe your company is not off at all.
Exactly.
Then you know what? And if your company's not off at all, there is not a hotter topic right now in corporate America than diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I would be advertising the heck out of that. Our
Exactly.
employees, we believe in equal pay. Now, granted, did they plan it that way? Maybe, maybe not, right? Either way, it can be a positive thing. But now you have the data to make some choices or to promote a really great thing right now
Right.
that may attract more top talent to your company.
Right.
From an employee standpoint, particularly women, is do your research and simply present facts and options. What I loved about what you shared, McCeil, especially in your example of titles, oftentimes we get something in our head of this is it, but you presented options. And as people, why would our employers be any different? We like options. I don't like giving just one option,
Right.
right? And by walking in and presenting facts and research and being professional about it, it's how you say it, not what you say, but the facts to support the how you say it. I love that. Those are some crazy knowledge bombs that you are dropping, and I'm imagine there's going to be a lot of listeners that have those aha moments. And that's what this week is about these types of resources. And we started with gender pay gap. Just to be clear to everyone, this is not about male bashing. It's not. And we need to look at where we are at right now. It's not pointing the finger and saying anyone's bad. It's let's self-assess and figure out where we're at, and then let's try to improve this.
Right.
And we have a tendency to overcomplicate things. And I think you gave clear, actionable uh, feedback that any employer and any employee could do if they chose to put the time into doing it. But you're providing resources and suggestions. The other hot topic, McSeal, when Chaz and I were really kicking this around, and Chaz was writing and we were reacting to these quotes, is around benefits, right? And I ran into this a lot when I worked at Safelite Auto Glass, and I launched the first ever women's committee for Safelite Auto Glass as a company. They and I want to qualify benefits. There's traditional what we would probably all classify as HR type of
Mm-hmm.
benefits. You
Mm-hmm.
know, the health insurance, the dental, right? And that's all part of it for sure. But I'm kind of lumping in a little bit some of these other, technically they shouldn't be benefits. It's just how we should do business, right? But that's not always the case. So when I think about, just for the sake of this conversation, when we're talking about benefits, I'm also talking about uniforms that actually fit women, opposed to a a male's uniform that's just in a smaller size,
Right.
or maternity leave, right? That falls more into the HR, or the fact that we acknowledge that women's statures are different. So too, if it, depending on their work, not to put the women in a position to have to ask for a step stool if that's needed for their work. Little things like that. I wanted to kind of pick your brain around that, and what you have observed has worked well, or, again, I'm interested in understanding employer side and getting your take on employer side, but as an employee, because as women, we're just trying to blend in. We already stick out enough.
Yeah. Yeah, I think number one, I think all the suggestions you made are phenomenal, but I think it's almost like creating a inclusive environment, right? And so looking at your workforce and saying, okay, how do I make everyone that's working here feel a part, one word, not two words, right? A part could either be a part, one word, or a part, two words. Um, how do I make them feel a part of the organization? And so I think the key would be you could definitely do a survey, right? And say, what are some things that would be helpful for you at work? What I've also seen most recently are remote options, if that's at all possible, whether it's one day or just remote time to see if people are interested in it. Surprisingly enough, there's people that are interested in it. There's also people that are not. Sometimes that's not possible, but if it is possible, how can we make that possible? Another option that's really popular now is wellness programs, where people can go online and do mind meditation or yoga or different things where they just kind of cool down for 2 or 3 minutes. And I've heard it said that if you can even take 5 minutes a day and really just do self reflections, it can get you further ahead the next day. So that's an option. Um, Even profit sharing, flexibility with gym opportunities. So people have workout options, maternity leave, paternity leave, parental care, childcare. I've even seen childcare options recently available. Um, so just to name a few, those are some. I've also seen tuition reimbursement options or tuition matches. So it'll encourage education for the staff. I've also seen perks such as reduced tickets to an NBA game or an NFL game, things like that. I mean, those are all things that lead to employee engagement, employee development. Also, one of the most effective programs I saw was a program where every employee had an opportunity to apply for a $2,000 grant. And it was a $2,000 grant for self care. And so if you got the grant, you could do whatever you needed to do for self care. And so one of the people that won it was a lady. She had applied to, she'd always wanted to take golf lessons. And so she said, if I get this grant, I want to take golf lessons and buy my first set of golf clubs. And so then the money, obviously there's appropriate taxes on it, but you get the money and then you're able to do whatever it is you want to do pursuant to your grant that you applied for. Those go a long way to really motivating employees and really, just changing the culture and the environment. And I think that it shows that the company's invested in the motivation or the welfare of the staff. So that those are some things I would throw out as healthy and exciting examples that companies could consider.
I'm connecting the dots for both, corporate, automotive corporate, and then automotive mom and pop, or
But if it's mom and pop, you could do $100, right? Or $500. It doesn't have to be 2,000, right? So whatever would work for your budget or your organization, just having a pool of money where people could write in and say that they want to apply for X for self-care. One, it gets them thinking about self-care. You see what I mean? So even if they don't win the grant, then they're in the mindset of, okay, this is what I need to
They
refresh.
at least researched to
Right,
write
right,
to ask for it, right?
right,
They thought about it.
right.
That's pretty awesome.
I guess as it relates to, gender. I mean, we talk about gender pay gap. Have you observed, because you've have you've dived into this diversity, equity, and inclusion topic at great lengths. Do you see a benefits gap as it relates to things that may be, I don't know, maybe more specific to women? Like when I think of maternity leave, that is not as common in shops, and especially a lot of smaller shops. There's been shop owners that do not hire women because of the possibility of them getting pregnant.
Yeah, I mean, I think thankfully, a lot of the tide is turning on that based on the requirements state by state that employers have to provide that option. But I think to the extent that folks are working places where they're not providing that option, that's definitely something that they need to be mindful of in terms of other places that do offer that as an option. And I think that this is where in the great attrition right now is the time where everybody's really changing places and in the seats of the employment setting. And so
Yeah.
back in the day of, let's say, our parents' days or our grandparents' days, they got a job, they went to work, and they worked there for 40, 50 years, and they retired, and that was it. But that's really not our lives, and that's not what's happening right now for us and the folks that are currently working, right? So most people currently working, whether they're a boomer, an Xer, a Gen Xer, a millennium, or whatever space they're in, they know that they could go somewhere else and work. So the difference is, I think now is more of a chance for people to do research. With all the
Yeah.
options that are available to us, even if you're not a good researcher, you know Google, and so you can go on Google and you can do some research. So that's what I would encourage
Yes.
people to do, is do your
Well,
research.
and it just hit me like a ton of bricks, McCeil. And I don't know why it didn't occur to me before, because I'm all about negotiation, right? And maybe that's my sales background, but negotiate your salary at the beginning. But it just hit me like, why not negotiate your benefits at the beginning
Oh
too?
no, you have to have a checklist when you're going into a new job, right? And so sometimes people only focus on salary, and when I do my session on negotiation, I talk about that a lot as well. So you have a checklist before you even take a job, right? Where you're talking about, okay, do you have profit sharing here? Again, do you have work from home options? Do you have fraternity leave, maternity leave? What leaves do you have available? Those are all things that are part of the checklist. What other benefits are possible? So you have to have in mind what your possibilities are.
I'm sitting here listening to you, and after interviewing over 100 women, and I kind of dig in and ask tough questions. And I can see a lot of women being afraid to ask that question or ask those questions in an interview for fear that they're like, oh, I'm not going to get hired because.
Yeah, so you don't ask it in the interview. I would never advise anybody to ask it in an interview. You get through the interview. You wait until you get the job offer. Once you get a job offer, then is when you start negotiating. And I think if anybody's afraid, I can make myself available to poke someone up and have that courageous conversation, but you have to have a checklist going in and say, these are the things that I need to really be even more excited about the job, right? I'm so happy that I was selected. But by the way, I was thinking about these things, and then you kind of go through your list.
Yeah, and that is the good and bad thing about smaller, non-large corporate, is that they tend to have more flexibility, right?
Well,
They don't have to go through a lot of red tape.
right. And I think, again, it's kind of like Christmas, right? You can't have everything you want necessarily, but you have a list. And so you know what you want. And I don't mean to offend anybody by using the word Christmas, but any holiday or birthday or whatever you
Yeah.
celebrate, I think the key is having a list and knowing what you're looking for and knowing what you want. But again, when you say women are leery about having the conversation, I think they're leery because a lot of women don't like confrontation. But again, it does not have to be confrontational. And that's where I feel like it's the miss. We feel like in order to get what we want, sometimes we have to fight. No, you don't have to fight. You have to negotiate. But and again, I have a series on negotiations, but there's over 10 to 15 different ways you can negotiate. And there's different tactics that you can employ while you're negotiating so that some tactics are soft, some are hard, some are easy, right? So you have to decide what type of person you are first to determine what type of style you employ when you're having those kind of conversations.
I I cannot think of a more important skill for women to take their life, career, relationships, because we negotiate with our partners all the time,
Every day, right?
right? And that is such a key thing to understand, because we think negotiation is confrontation, and those are not synonymous
No, no. And the key
at
for
all.
me is you don't have to burn a bridge or, destroy a relationship to ask for what you want. And that's where I think people get nervous, right? They feel like, oh, if I ask for more money, I'm going to get fired. Well, depending on how you broach the conversation, right? You just have to be creative and set the stage. You don't have to make a demand letter. I think that's where
Yeah,
people get mixed up in the conversation.
yeah. Wow. Chaz, was there anything that I may have missed?
As I'm listening to this, I am thinking about some of the conversations I've had with business owners over the years. And just in case we have any of them out there that are sitting here going, yeah, so that sounds like a lot of work. Self analysis and all this, it's a lot of work. So I forget it. Forget inclusion, forget diversity. Like, we're just going to stick with the status quo because why not? What's in it for me? What's what's in it for businesses when it comes to diversity, equity, and inclusion?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great question. I think, again, it kind of goes back to the people wanting to keep things as they are and being afraid of change. And so I think what's in it for them in terms of diversity is they're going to want to know the return on investment, right? And so having a workforce that reflects the world that we live in provides innovation. It provides opportunity for them to have access to things that maybe they're not thinking about because it's not a part of their background, it's not a part of their way of living, right? But having someone at the table that doesn't look like them can give them a broader way of looking at issues and even identifying issues, right? Maybe even catching something that they might not have meant any harm by that somebody else could see as offensive. And I think that's the good thing. And then really just giving a broader depth and breadth of the conversation and just a diversity of ideas. So everything's not all the same. And then it's almost like it makes me think of Kodak. There was a conversation when they were first talking about digital cameras and digital film, and they said, "Oh well, we don't need to worry about digital photos because we can develop our film." And they said, "Well, I think we need to start thinking about it." And had Kodak thought about it differently, then their whole world wouldn't have been uprooted by the digital camera revolution. So again, it's just those kind of things, being able to have the diversity of thought and attitude and mannerisms involved in conversations makes for a better team and a deeper discussion.
That's a great analogy, McCeil, because diversity, equity, and inclusion, it's not going anywhere. It's going to continue to grow. It's going to continue to expand. It just either you get on board and you find your place in it, whatever that looks like. Ignoring it's not going to make it go away. You're just
No.
going to end up putting your company in jeopardy.
Yeah. Yeah, it definitely is. It's not going away. I mean, if you look at any of the statistics by McKinsey or Pew Research, I mean, it's just massively overwhelming what the next generations are going to look like. And they're going to look very diverse. So I definitely think people, again, it's about research, right? Being prepared for the future.
Yeah. Are you a business owner? If you are a business owner, at some point we have to get out of our operational head, right? Just getting through the day and getting my to-do list done, and you have to spend some time on strategy. You have to. And DE&I, diversity, equity, inclusion, is strategy. And there is tons of statistics and research out there that support that companies that make this a priority and are diverse are more profitable.
Right.
This isn't a fad. There's statistics to back this up. So, hey, take the message. If you want more money, we're giving you a gift here.
Right. Right.
McCeil, thank you so much for taking the time to have this discussion with us. Give us an opportunity to dive in. We've referenced you as a resource and your research in our blog post, and it's been an honor to hear your voice, not just see statistics and research, but to hear your voice and to add even a little more background and color to the research that we've done. And I'm going to go dig into your negotiation stuff, because I'm telling you what, that's the thing that moves the needles for us, ladies. It's that understanding and empowering ourselves to negotiate, and that it doesn't equal confrontation. Chaz, I saw you come off.
No, I was just going to say I'll be checking that out too because I am garbage at negotiations. I'm just like, okay. Yeah, so I could definitely use some tips on that.
McCeil, thank you again. And who knows, I may reach out to you to be a speaker at, I'm putting together some workshops, and it'd be way cool to have you speak to a large group of women around negotiation.
Oh, I'd love to. Thank you guys so much. You're the best. Great talking to you guys. All the best to you.
Thanks for watching. By being open to learning more about these topics, you are fueling a movement that creates a safer and more inclusive environment for women in our industry. And for that, we thank you. It's up to all of us to keep this conversation alive. The only way to rid the industry of the darkness is to shine light on it. The entire 5-part blog series of the dirty little secrets of the automotive and skilled trades industries can be found on ChasidyRaeSisk.com and Femcanic.com. Until next time, my friends.